Hey everybody, this one is called Moms, Please Have Your Babies at Home. First of all, I would never tell a mom where to have her baby. And so this is just meant as a encouragement, okay? Something to think about. Having babies is nothing I've ever done. I will never know what that's like. And so I would never, ever tell a woman where to have her baby. But I would hope today that this gives you something to think about and something to consider. So let's get going. First of all, I do not have children, okay? These courts... Children is a word used in international law. There's such a thing as a child corporation. Okay, all of this stuff is corporate law. And if you get mixed up in it, see, you can't use their words. Okay, so I do not have children, but I do have sons and daughters. And I've got 3 sons and 2 daughters. I've got posterity, but they're not children. And one of my sons and one of my daughters was born at home. And so we're going to talk a little bit about my experience with that and things that I did. And I am in my 60s right now. So I've learned a lot of things over the years. I would do things differently over the years if I had the opportunity, but it's all 20/20 hindsight. So all I'm saying is to moms, giving you some food for thought. But I always told my wife that having babies was her department. Okay, I never ever. I asked her about having the babies at home, but I told her that whatever her decision was, that I would support her with that because that's her department. I'm not going to tell her where to have her babies. It's just not going to happen. And so she always made the decision. And she's a sweetheart. And so some of them, like there was our first 2 babies we had in the hospital. And then the next 2 we had at home. And then the last one, my wife was in her 40s, and she felt more comfortable doing it in the hospital, and I supported her with that. And so the last baby was held in the hospital. So, so I would never tell any man, or no man should ever tell a woman where to have her babies. You can just encourage her to do it. But she's got to make that call. That's a personal decision. And, that's part of being a family. So anyways, I still remember my daughter as our first baby. When I was single, even up until my daughter was born, you could put a baby in my hands and I would say, well, that's real nice, and give it back real quick before it spit up on me. I just was not into babies at all. Let me tell you, I was single, even when I was married. But when my daughter was born, my whole world was turned upside down. And I still remember to this day, the doctor, somebody had told my wife that in the emergency room and in the delivery room, the lights are bright. And so the baby will be squinting when she's born, or he, or whoever's born. And so to put your hands to shade her eyes in the lights, and she'll open her eyes up. And my wife did that. And my first daughter's name was Jessica. And Jessica opened up her eyes and started looking around. And I still remember that to this day. And ever since that happened, she's had me wrapped around her little baby finger. So anyways, Now, my son, our first home birth was my son in Arizona. We were in Phoenix at the time. This was actually in an apartment. And I was working swing shift. So I got home around midnight or shortly after midnight. And we all went to bed like we normally do. This was our third. This is our third baby. And we all went to bed. And my wife, in the middle of the night, about 4 o'clock in the morning, nudges me and says, "I think my water broke." I said, "Well, I guess got to call that midwife." Because my wife had already been making arrangements with a midwife, and the midwife was very well known in the Phoenix area. And she had she'd been in the Phoenix newspaper. And she had a doctor all set up. She told my wife that if there's an emergency, I'm calling the ambulance. It's not negotiable. You're going to the hospital. So my wife understood that right up front. And so she had been to see the doctor that this midwife had recommended, and everything was all set up. And so anyways, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. My wife's water broke, and the midwife comes over and all her equipment and stuff like that. And this midwife had another girl with her that was a training midwife. And, my son was born. And so it was like about 3 hours later, my son was born. And, we'd been up most of the night. And so after it was all done and finished, then we all went to bed. And then the next morning, about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, we got up, and my wife had to go get some herbs. And so we went to a health food store, and we were buying herbs. And my wife was holding, this is Wilson's, my son. My wife was holding Wilson in her arms. And she says, "Oh, yeah, I had this baby last night." And, the people in the store, "What, really?" And my wife was always, she was amazing, quite frankly. She would have a baby, and after it's all done, you'd never know she was even pregnant. So anyways, so that was interesting. And so then my fourth was my daughter. We were in Ontario, Canada, and in a little town called Uxbridge, about 40 miles northeast of Toronto. And what happened was Ontario, and I would encourage anybody from Canada to definitely do this, okay, because they have that socialized medicine. So the government actually paid for the midwife there. And because it saves them money, they don't have to spend so much money. It's a lot cheaper than having you go to the hospital. And so it saves resources, it saves money. And so the government paid for the midwife, but the midwife did the same thing. Okay. They have a licensing program that they have to go through in Canada, and they have to be certified and approved and all that stuff. And the midwife was very, very professional. And there was a doctor, there was a hospital all set up. The midwife told my wife that if there's an emergency and we're calling the ambulance and it's not negotiable, and you're going to the hospital. So that was all arranged. My wife had been to see the doctor and everything. It was all set up. And so this was on New Year's Day. I can't remember events surrounding it too much. I think she was in labor for quite a while with Taylor. That was Taylor, my fourth. And so what happened is they had my wife in the tub, and it was very, very easy for her. And finally she was, because I guess the warm water and the contractions aren't near as bad when they're in the warm water like that. And that's why I say I would never, ever tell a woman where to have her baby, because I'm certainly not an expert in that stuff, and I'll just support her wherever she decides. But I would encourage her to educate herself and make an informed consent. But so anyways, what happened is my wife was in the tub, and she could have actually had the baby in the tub. But the midwife said to my wife, so where do you want to have this baby? Do you want to have it here, or do you want to have it in bed? And my wife says, okay, let's go to the bed. And so she got up out of the tub, and they went to the bed, and she had her baby. And it was quite interesting, because there's no hospital in Uxbridge, Ontario. And it's, Canada's socialized medicine, so they put hospitals where they're needed. And so there's no hospital in Uxbridge, Ontario. So my daughter was born at 9:00 on New Year's Day, and she was the New Year's baby, and all these merchants were giving her all sorts of stuff, eh? So we got all this New Year's baby stuff, eh? It's just kind of interesting. So anyways, so it was a big deal. New Year's baby, born in Ontario, Uxbridge, Ontario, where they don't have, a hospital, and that doesn't happen every year, I should say. So then my last one, my son, born in Arizona hospital. It was a hospital. My wife was in her 40s. She wasn't comfortable doing it at home, and so she decided to do it in the hospital, and that was fine with me. And so I still remember my wife was very straight-laced, and she never did drugs, okay? Never did marijuana, never drank alcohol, never smoked, never did any of that stuff. And neither did I. Of course, when I was younger, in my 20s, I kind of got mixed up in all of that stuff. But by the time I met my wife, I was done with that, and I wasn't interested in doing any of that stuff. And so we got along great, and we didn't have to worry about alcohol getting mixed up in our relationship or anything like that. And we got along pretty good, I think. So she wanted to have the baby in the hospital. So I remember she said that the pain was getting a bit much for her, and so she was going to ask the nurses for something to take the edge off the pain. And so they did. And after they gave her, I think they gave her some Demerol or something like that. Anyways, I went over to see, I was in the room. I was in the delivery room, sitting in the corner. They had a chair sitting in the corner, and I just sat there watching everything. And my wife, I went over to see my wife to see how she was doing. And she says to me, man, are these drugs ever good? So I guess they give her some good Demerol. I don't know, something that really took the pain off. Anyway, she was quite high. Anyway, so I was sitting over there in the corner, and Hunter's head popped out. Okay, that was my son. His head popped out, and I'll tell you, the nurses, I mean, everything goes into panic mode when that happened. And they were planning on taking her down to a delivery room, but they didn't bother with that. Now she had Hunter right then and there, and so that's the story about Arizona. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you what I did in Canada. They gave us the paperwork. The midwife filled out the paperwork for the birth, but they gave it to us, and we could do with it what we wanted. Okay, we didn't have to file it. At the time, I didn't know the things that I know now, And I wouldn't have filed it, quite frankly, if knowing what I know now. I wouldn't have filed it. I would have put it in the family Bible. Okay. We live and learn. So we could have had, my daughter could have not been registered. And there's a procedure for that, and she'll be able to do everything normally, just like anybody else. With my son, he was born in a hospital, so it was forced registration. But I did something, I recorded something in the county, and Arizona is pretty good about, making it so that you can record anything. Okay, I've had county clerks tell me that they'd record a hamburger if I wanted to. So, Arizona's pretty good about that. And so we'll go through at the end of this presentation, we'll go through what I did in Arizona. So anyways, the point is that I got 3 sons and 2 daughters, and my wife makes absolutely beautiful babies, and I love them all to pieces. And as with any family, sometimes you have your differences, and so it's water under the bridge, right? Anyway, so let's get going here. First of all, I'm not a liar. Well, I'm in a lawyer. No, I'm in a liar. You should never take my word for anything. You should always do your own research, and I've provided references to aid you in your research, but I don't know everything. I'm open to any ideas. There's 4 types of people you'll meet in your life. There's the people who try to wake up the slaves. There's the slave masters. There's the people who have no idea they're slaves. And there's the people who like being slaves. Which one are you? Do you really know for sure? Are you who you think you are? If you can see through the illusion, then you are the solution. If the people don't know their basic rights and freedoms, how can they know when or if their rights and freedoms are being infringed? Never forget the men who started this country are marijuana-growing, whiskey-drinking, tax-evading rebels who left their beds at night to shoot at the cops. And that is so true. And I think it's going to come back to that, quite frankly. They were leaving their beds at night to go and engage the British is what they were doing. The current powers that be. And they were going out hunting the Brits. And that's what they were doing. Think about it. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex. I don't trust the military industrial complex. I don't trust the mainstream media. I don't trust the bankster criminal cabal that owns the government, owns the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex, owns the mainstream military industrial complex, and owns the mainstream media. And if you call me a conspiracy theorist, I don't trust you. Government's not reason. It's not eloquence. It is force. Like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master. So there's a minor estate. Okay, this is Title 31 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 363.6. And it's actually quite a bit more than just this. This is just a couple paragraphs. It's about 1 page is what it is. But this is a couple paragraphs out of it that's blown up onto this presentation because this is the stuff that's important. Okay? A minor means an individual under the age of 18 years. The term minor is also used to refer to an individual who has attained the age of 18 years but has not yet taken control of the securities contained in his or her minor account. And we're going to talk, the next slide, we're going to talk about what this is saying. Got to think about this. What is it saying? Entity means any owner of a Treasury direct account that's not an individual. Entity is a sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, limited liability company, or professional limited liability company, trust, the estate of a decedent, or the estate of a living person, such as an incompetent or a minor. Okay? So that's found in Title 31 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 363.6. So what that's saying, think about what that's saying. That's saying that there's a minor estate created at birth. created at birth by the hospital when they created some securities. Okay, the hospital created some securities and they deposited it into a Treasury direct account. It's not a birth certificate. If you go to the Treasury's website and do a search for birth certificate, they'll actually come up with a page that'll say that the birth certificate's not a security. So it's not a birth certificate. There's something else that they create that's a security. And the securities are deposited into a Treasury direct account. Well, so think about it. Okay, a Treasury direct account is the Treasury is not the U.S. Treasury. Okay, it's the International Monetary Fund. The Treasury is now the International Monetary Fund, which is an agency of the World Bank. Okay, that's where all of this is going. Okay, these people, it's the bankster thieves and their fake money. If it wasn't for this fake money, they wouldn't be able to do this. This is Title 15, U.S. Code, Section 77B, promotions, definitions, promotions of efficiency, competition, and capital formation. Capital formation. The term security means any note, stock, treasury stock, security, future, security-based swap, bond, debenture, evidence of indebtedness, certificate of interest or participation in any profit-sharing agreement. Okay, so the point being, and I'm not going to read through this whole thing, it's evidence of indebtedness, okay? So that minor estate is property. It's owned, and it's a slave, okay? It is property. That's why a slave is a slave. A slave is a slave because it's property. It's owned. If you read those old court cases prior, the antebellum, they're called antebellum cases, which is prior to the Civil War, where slavery was the issue, the debate in the case was always over property rights. A slave is property. This is Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. Well, so it's regulation. That's Title 31 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So that means it's property of the United States. The United States owns that security. Okay, you are a slave. It is a slave. And so this is all diabolically evil. It's slavery is what it is. And the sooner you get your head around that, the sooner you can do something about it. And I am working on, I got a bunch of criminal complaints against Janet Yellen right now that I'm getting ready to file. This is taken from the Code of Law for the District of Columbia, okay, in 1901. An act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia, the legal estate to be the sestike use, okay? A use is usufruct, okay? That's Roman law. And this is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, under the definition of mort main. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holes, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses. Use meaning usufruct. Thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits while the season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. Okay, that's still today. Okay, the Roman cult, all of these courts are courts of admiralty. That's a court of equity. It's the Roman cult. All these courts, these black-robed military uniforms, these are Roman cult courts. To be bound in conscience to account to a sestike use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. Well, that's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts. The foundation of modern conveyancing is still the foundation of modern conveyancing. Pharmakeia. If you look up the definition of sorcery, the Greek derivative of the word sorcery, it comes from pharmakeia. Okay? Sorcerer. Pharmakeia. That means that sorcerers are peddling pharmaceuticals. That's what sorcerers do. They're peddling pharmaceuticals made by the pharmaceutical companies. So these hospitals are peddling pharmaceuticals. They're religious organizations. They're Satanists, folks. That's what they are. They're Satanists by definition. That's why your moms, you need to think about maybe having your baby at home. Okay, there's ways of doing it that's perfectly safe, that people are very professional and know how to do it, and study it out for yourself and decide for yourself what's best for you. But it's something to think about. Hey, Sonny, you look depressed. Here, take some Prozac. You're hyperactive. You need Ritalin. Take this, take that. It's okay. I'm a doctor. That's a drug pusher. They're sorcerers peddling pharmaceuticals. They're drug dealers. That's what they are. That's what these hospitals are. This is Malachi 3 and 5. And I will come near to you in judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, against the adulterers, against the false swearers, against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, and to turn aside the stranger from his right, and fear not me, saith the Lord of hosts. But the fearful and unbelieving and abominable and the murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And that's Revelations 21 and 8. So they want you to be afraid. That's why they want you to go to the hospital. Be afraid. Be afraid. Be afraid of biological warfare agents. Be afraid of fake pandemics. Where are the bodies piled in the streets? Be afraid of the military police. Be afraid of the IRS. Be afraid. Fear is an acronym. Stands for false evidence appearing real. But the Bible tells us to fear not. I mean, there's loads of scriptures in there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's got to be like 40 or 50 scriptures there that say fear not in the Bible. This is King James Version too, by the way. Hospitals are full of sorcerers peddling their pharmaceuticals. Religious houses. This is taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition. Religious houses. Houses set apart for pious uses. Okay? Use as in usufruct. Such as monasteries, churches, hospitals, and all other places where charity was extended to the relief of the poor and orphans, or for the use or exercise of religion. Usufruct. Also called hospitaliers. And use means usufruct. These hospitals are Satanists. Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, Volume 1. Contra formam collationis is a writ that lay where a man had given lands in perpetual alms to a lay houses of religion, as to an abbot, a convent, or to a warden or master of any hospital, and is convent to find certain poor men with necessaries and do divine service. If they alienated the land to the desertion of the house and church, then the donor or his heirs should bring this writ to recover the land. So if they, in other words, if he donated it to a hospital, then and they quit using it for the hospital, then he could recover the land. Anyways, so again, this is saying that a hospital is a house of religion. were the Knights of Religious Order, so called because they built a hospital in Jerusalem where pilgrims were received. Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 1. Maison Dieu, a house of God, a monastery, religious house, or hospital. The word is mentioned in, that's an English statute, 39 Elizabeth chapter 5, which is basically the 39th act under Elizabeth, 39th year of her reign, I think, chapter 5. Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2. Minor estate securities were created by hospitals. That's who creates these securities. These hospitals are doing that. Okay, they're Satanists. It's fake money. Okay, and so, you know, it's fake. It's a fraud. It's not real money. Okay, it's a fraud. It's a deception. That's all satanic. Usufruct is a type of trust, and there's a convention on the law applicable to trusts and their recognition entered into force 1st of January 1992 under the Hague Conference on Private International Law. A usufruct is a trust, which is a minor estate. There's also a Hague Convention concerning the international administration of the estates of deceased persons. That's why the minor estate pays for wars. Okay, that's how they pay for these wars. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here shortly. Okay, so that's another reason, moms, you might want to think about not having your baby in a hospital, because that minor estate, they send your kids off to these killing fields. So then when they turn up dead, they take the money out of that minor estate and it's millions of dollars, and they use it to pay the national debt. It's all fraud and deception. Banksters is private international law. Securities is fake money. Usufruct is Roman law. My contact information is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page, I deleted it due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group, Sovereignty International, is being deleted. Quite frankly, I haven't been to Facebook in months, if not years. I'm not interested in going there. They're just nothing but a deep state tool to track everything you do. They get people to volunteer their information on there. That's what they do. I have a private group on freelist.org called Administering Your Public Servants. I've got a private group on Google called Administering Your Public Servants. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. I have a how-to subscription channel available, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. I've also got a channel on Rumble, but I don't have that many videos up there because Rumble makes them difficult to upload for some reason. I haven't figured it out. Anyways, I've got True Social, Engineer Win, and I have a group called Sovereignty International. And on Twitter, I got them to reopen my profile on Twitter. It's Engineer Win. And so I make announcements. I'll put this out on Twitter and True Social once I have it uploaded. Civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, or more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. That's Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. If you try to take control of the securities, you're submitting yourself to regulations. Okay, I don't know how to do it, but I'm not interested in doing it either because it's all in the regulations. And regulations are property and it's a contract. Okay, you have to understand that. You're getting in a contract with the devil, is what you're doing. And it's fake money. I want nothing to do with it. Matter of fact, I recently uploaded a video where I'm demanding Janet Yellen to dissolve and liquidate the minor estate. And the slave is property, and you're volunteering for slavery. That's what you're doing. I want it dissolved and liquidated. And I've actually got some criminal complaints against Janet Yellen, and I'll be uploading a video on that. Although I'm debating about whether I'm going to upload it to YouTube or to my HowTube channel, because, I'm concerned about YouTube taking it down. And YouTube is still taking my videos down on a pretty regular basis. Every once in a while, they send me an email, we took this video down. And so all the videos are put up on HowTube. And so there's quite a few videos on HowTube now. And so I'm eventually I'm going to send Janet Yellen a nastygram, and it's going to go to everybody and their brother, and that will definitely be on HowTube. It won't be on YouTube, but I'll probably send out a short video saying that I uploaded it to HowTube. This is a Government Corporation Operation Act of Canada, okay? And the reason I'm showing this is because it's the same in every country, okay? Every corporation, for all its purposes, is an agency of the bitch. Well, I meant the son of a bitch. It's the son of a bitch now. Canadian Ownership and Control Determination Act, okay? Section 2 definitions. In this act, owned means subject to the regulations. Again, it's the same thing in the U.S. If it's owned, it's subject to the regulations. If it's owned, it's property. If it's owned, it's a slave. And this is Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. Okay, so again, if it's owned, it's property. It's a slave. A U.S. citizen is other property belonging to the United States. A U.S. citizen is actually a corporation. Corporation, this is under Title 15, United States Code, Section 44, shall be deemed to include any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust or association, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members, and has shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest. And then it goes through the same definition without shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest, except partnerships. Okay, so partnerships is not a corporation, and that is really powerful, let me tell you. But anyways, that's good to know. I use it all the time. The term United States business means United States citizen. Okay, so a United States citizen is a corporation. It's a fictitious entity. It's the minor estate. Okay, think about it. It's the minor estate is a United States business. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states are not included in the catalog of controversies over which Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power nationally covers those citizens, even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. So think about it. Plenary power. It's dictatorship. Okay, that's the Commerce Clause. They're talking about the Commerce Clause here. And so under the Commerce Clause, you don't get an Article 3 court. Under the Commerce Clause, it's dictatorship. Okay, it's Article 1. And they can do anything they want. Status, standing, condition, compare a state. A corporation has no status as a citizen outside the jurisdiction where it's created. A corporation's a citizen's a corporation. If they're assaulting you with their U.S. citizen slave, then you're in the District of Columbia. Law of status, the category law dealing with personal or non-proprietary rights, whether in rem or in personam. It is one of 3 departments into which civil law is divided. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition, 25, page 2591. So they're bringing the District of Columbia outside 10 Mile Square in violation of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 Mile Square. Okay, so they're using that minor estate so they can assault you with their District of Columbia dictatorship. It's exactly what they're doing, folks. And when you start bringing that up, all of a sudden they start looking at ways to drop this thing, okay? I'm telling you. Plenary jurisdiction, the court's full and absolute power over the subject matter and the parties in the case. Plenary, full, complete, entire Plenary, full, complete in the courts of admiralty and the English ecclesiastical courts, causes or suits in respect of different courts of proceeding, in which are termed summary, plenary, or summary. Okay, so plenary and summary could be considered similar words, similar phrases. And this is taken from Wikipedia, but it's I got here Legal Information Institute too, and so Wikipedia is really not that good a source, but it's basically confirming what Legal Information Institute is saying, and Legal Information Institute is a very good authority. It's Cornell University. Anyways, plenary is a plenary power or plenary authority. It's a complete and absolute power to take action on a particular issue with no limitations. It is derived from the Latin word plenus. Plenary power, complete power over a particular area with no limitations. It's a dictatorship. This term is often used to describe the commerce power of Congress. Under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, Congress is granted full power over interstate commerce. The course has found that states are not able to pass laws affecting interstate commerce without the permission of Congress. So again, that's plenary power. It's a dictatorship. If you're in the District of Columbia, it's a dictatorship. That's why the IRS, the Treasury that's the IRS is their tool, and that's why it's a dictatorship. But again, you start bringing up the issue of where's your authority outside of District of Columbia, okay? And that's why they always have to send you stuff from interstate, so they'll always send it to you from another state. And this Constitution is the supreme law of the land, okay? U.S. Constitution, Article 6, Clause 2. This Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the constitutional laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. That's the notwithstanding clause. And that means that we don't care what your state codes and Constitution says. And I'm telling you, you bring that up, and you demand a trial by jury because Article 3 of the Constitution and the 7th Amendment and the 6th Amendment all require trial by jury. You bring that up and you stand your ground and you remind that judge about this Article 6, Clause 2, about the supreme law of the land, and doesn't matter what any state law or Constitution says, then they'll come up with a way to dismiss that thing or drop it. And I've seen it happen. I've also seen it where they'll say, well, we can't give you a trial by jury. All we can give you is a jury trial, and that's your opportunity to bring this up. I'm telling you, well, your oath of office, I'm telling you, and cases disappear. If you try to take control of any securities to change the status of the minor estate, you're volunteering yourself for the Commerce Clause dictatorship. It's exactly what you're doing, folks. Status is Roman law. At common law, status means nothing. It is a trap, and you will not have clean hands. If you want a remedy from equity, you have to have clean hands. And the Bible says to trust not in the arm of flesh. Jesuits and their dupes are peddling this stuff about taking control of the minor estate, changing your status, all that stuff. That's nothing but Jesuits and their tools. My other videos, check out my other videos: Bankster Thieves Playlist, Roman Cult Playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 8, Do-It-Yourself How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft, Martial Laws Here, Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax, Do-It-Yourself Free Mail, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts, Canada Border Pigs Playlist, Bar Members and Their Satanic Connections Playlist. Statutes have been passed extending courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury. The War of Independence was fought over the denial of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish in order the exercise of the law martial. So this is the same stuff that went on in the War of Independence. For altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such dictatorship would reduce us. And that's Continental Congress, 1775. All subjects over which the sovereign power of the state extends are objects of taxation, but those over which it does not extend are exempt from taxation. This proposition may be pronounced as self-evident. It's obvious. The sovereignty of the state extends to everything which exists by its authority or its permission. And this is actually an expansion on that case, because it's right in here too. The sovereignty of the state extends to everything which exists by its own authority or is introduced by its permission. But does it extend to those means which are employed by Congress to carry into execution powers conferred on that body by the people of the United States? We think it demonstrable that it does not. That's why they have to use the Commerce Clause. They haven't got a shred of authority over a man or woman. And this is what this is saying. Those powers are not given by the people of a single state. They are given by the people of the United States to a government whose laws made in pursuance of the Constitution are declared to be supreme. Consequently, the people of a single state cannot confer a sovereignty which will extend over them. So again, we the people cannot confer. They have to go, when you start bringing up, I'm we the people. What are you talking to me for? You start bringing that up, and they're going to find something else to talk about. I guarantee you, they're never, ever going to answer that one. The sovereignty of the United States resides in the people, and Congress cannot invoke the sovereignty of the people to override their will as declared in the Constitution. The state citizen is immune from any and all government attacks and procedure absent contract. Every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. He's not bound by institutions formed by his fellow men without his consent. Two maxims of law. These are maxims of law. The power which is derived cannot be greater than that from which it is derived. Okay, so we gave them the power to authorize. They can't say anything to us. If you're one of we the people, they got nothing to say to you. Nor does the conclusion by any means suppose the superiority of the judicial to the legislative power. It only supposes that the power of the people is superior to both. That's actually a court case. The first is a maxim, the second's a court case. My opinion is, and long has been, that the mayor and aldermen of a city corporation or the president and directors of a bank or the president and directors of a railroad company or of similar corporations are the true parties that sue and are sued as trustees and representatives of the constantly changing stockholders. A corporation, therefore, being not a natural person but a mere creature of the mind, invisible and intangible, cannot be a citizen of a state or of the United States, cannot fall within the terms of the power of the above-mentioned article, and can therefore neither plead nor be impleaded in the courts of the United States. And that's Rundle versus Delaware and Raritan Canal Company, 1852. Obviously, the 14th Amendment changed that a little bit, but the point is that corporations and people can't mix, okay? And so they have nothing to say to we the people. That's why they have to use that minor estate. That's why that minor estate was set up, so they could assault you with it, especially when you don't know the law, and they'll just walk all over you and sell you into slavery. And the prisons are populated with people that were sold into slavery as collateral for that minor estate. The United States District Court is not a true United States court established under Article 3 to administer the judicial power of the United States, but was created by virtue of the sovereign congressional faculty granted under Article 4, Section 3, making all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or belonging to the United States. Okay, this is Puerto Rico, but it's all, again, they're all Article 4, Section 3. A court can be a court of general jurisdiction for some purposes and a court of limited jurisdiction for other purposes. When, therefore, a court of general jurisdiction proceeds under a special statute, it becomes a court of limited jurisdiction for the purposes of such proceeding. They always proceed under a statute. And so, therefore, they're always an inferior court of limited jurisdiction. Accordingly, where a court of general jurisdiction, I won't say always, but 99% of the time, accordingly, where a court of general jurisdiction undertakes to carry out a special power, decision made and exercise of such power is treated as a ruling of a court of limited jurisdiction, and the presumption applicable to a court of general jurisdiction that it acted within the scope of its jurisdiction does not apply. And it is familiar law that when special statutory authority and derogation of common law is conferred on courts of general jurisdiction, such a court of general jurisdiction becomes quad hoc, a court of inferior or limited jurisdiction. And that just nails it right there, okay? So as soon as they're dealing with the statute, they're inferior courts of limited jurisdiction. The word administrative is synonymous with the word executive, okay? So they're working for the executive branch. The word administrative connotes of or pertains to administration, especially management, as by managing or conducting or superintending the execution, application, or conduct of persons or things. And thus, the administrative acts are those acts which are necessary to be done to carry out legislative policies and purposes already declared by the legislative body. In fact, it is common to use the two words in tandem. What is called proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety in circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military power. That's why they have to pass statutes for common law offenses like murder and assault. That's why all statutes are edicts under martial law. We can't even begin to count the number of times judges, lawyers, and statesmen have said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by statutes. They'd be more truthful if they said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by martial law. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge H. Ella of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. There's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. That means it's the minor estate. It's the only thing that's subject to it. Minor estate is derogation of common law. It's inferior court of limited jurisdiction. That means that the minor estate is the only thing. That's why they have to attack you with that minor estate. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. A minor estate, again, is in derogation of common law, so under Texas law only applies to the minor estate. Inferior court of limited jurisdiction. Under a military dictatorship, there is no law, which is why they're required to pass statutes, which are edicts, for common law crimes like murder and assault. This creates civil law, which creates democracy. Under a military dictatorship, you have a democracy. Democracy is international law. Always, always, always challenge jurisdiction. I've got exclusive content available on HowTube. It's $9.99 a month for videos plus unlimited email consultations, but I'm not a liar. Well, I'm an attorney. No, I'm a liar. But I can't tell you what I would do and where to find the forms under certain circumstances. The only power that the New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit. But I cannot fight all the battles. I need more people doing it and being on point. Some of my exclusive content is an Arlington private information share. That's 7 videos by itself. Land deed training, I think there's 2 or 3 videos of that. Estoppel certificates training. Foreclosure estoppel certificates training. Corporate denial training. Toll roads notice and demand training. Invoice training. Notice of void judgment training. Revocation of signature training. Third-party witness training. Federal habeas corpus training. Revocation of voter registration, criminal complaint training. There's several videos on that, and I'm going to probably do some here pretty quick with this Janet Yellen criminal complaints that I'm filing. I'm getting ready to send them out. Love letters, I call them. Lawsuit training, I got 1 video on that. There needs to be more, so that's something I need to do. Other training requests, I'm open to any requests, but it's got to be something I haven't already done or something that I can do. Northeast private information share videos. I have to do a petition or a training video on the petition for writ of mandamus, and all of my videos taken down by YouTube will be up in my exclusive content. And there's first views of all new uploads. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free, linked in my videos and on my website. All exclusive content will be on HowTube, and you can buy a subscription there. And so it's Sovereignty International on HowTube. So if you're in a zip code, then you're in the District of Columbia. This is the said Supreme Court. This is Code of Law for the District of Columbia, Section 3, 31 Stat 1190. The said Supreme Court shall divide said district into 10 subdistricts and prescribe the place in each subdistrict where the justice thereof shall have his office for the transaction of business, and may change the boundaries of such subdistricts and the locations of the offices of the justices therein from time to time as the volume and convenience of the business may require. All corporations are in a zip code. All government officers are in a zip code, and that means they're a corporation. United States Postal Service is a corporation domiciled in the District of Columbia, and the Postal Service is where the zip code was originated from. Should a suit be brought against any party or corporation in any district in which he or it does not reside or hold business, and a plea to the jurisdiction on this account be filed by said defendant, the party or corporation interposing such plea shall disclose under oath the district in which he or it should have been sued. And that's, again, Code of Law for the District of Columbia. The Code of Law for the District of Columbia has a whole chapter, and it's a huge part of it, entitled Corporations. So all corporations are in the District of Columbia. And that's found under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Tyrants. When you incorporate into the government. Everything subject to regulations is government property. A corporation is a franchise from the government. My new Trump book is available. It's actually not so new, but it's still available. Trump, a true American patriot or not? Mike Blackwell asked me to write the book, and he hired a company to publish it, and they wrote this back part, and I think they kind of nailed it there. It says, in Trump, a true American patriot or not, Glenn Fern and Mike Blackwell reveal the depths of corruption, deceit, and manipulation infesting our political system for hundreds of years, regardless of political affiliation. Read the hard evidence that exposes how our elected officials sold Americans into slavery. Understand the Founding Fathers' true intent when they formed our Republican form of government. Discover the influence of the satanic Roman cult on our politicians and political system. Does Donald Trump want to transfer power back to we the people? And Trump, you will see the great battle that is upon us. And I think they nailed it there, I'll tell you. So you can order the book from Amazon or my website. On my website, actually, I'm going to raise it. It's $40 on my website, but the costs are going up, and so it's going to go up to $45 here pretty soon. I prefer you order the book from my website, sovereigntyinternational.fyi. Amazon.com does not provide autographed books. If you want the book autographed, order the book from my website. But don't forget to let me know what you want the autograph to say if you want it to say something in particular. Do you want to know the origins of the deep state and who's behind it? The book is basically 99% provable facts, because Mike asked me to write the book, and it took me about 6 weeks to write the book, because all I did is I took a lawsuit and manipulated it and turned it into the book. And then he had to babysit me for 6 months and get it ready to publish, and so that's why I put it on the book. But so it's 99% provable facts. I go through law dictionary definitions, international treaties, court cases, all sorts of stuff to prove everything that's in there, although there is a little bit of opinion. Not much, a little bit. Do you want to know why it's called the Trump administration? Do you want to know what an administration is? Do you want to know how Trump came to be president? Do you want to know who owns Congress? Why do you think Pelosi would get up there and say, we can't read this bill until after we pass it? She's taking orders. Do you want to know why they're called law enforcement officers? It's because they're enforcing the martial law. Do you want to know how you have become a slave? Okay, well, if you're property, you're a slave. That's that minor estate. Do you want to know what the root cause of the War of Independence was? It's in the book. It's the same thing that's going on right now. Do you want to know why every president goes to visit the Pope on their first international trip? It's in the book. So, I already told you about Mike Blackwell. I don't know how many of you have heard of Jerome Corsi. He's a guy that lives up in the Northeast. He's got a PhD in political science. He's got a website, a YouTube channel, written a bunch of books. There's a YouTube video where in 2015 he says that he was visited by 5 generals, and they told him they were going to overthrow Obama. And he said, well, you can do that if you want, but you might want to go talk to Donald Trump first. 3 months later, he gets a phone call. They decided not to overthrow Obama because Donald Trump had agreed for him for president. So, again, it's got 95% provable facts. Howard Hughes, I don't know if you remember all these billionaires. I think my opinion is that all these billionaires get approached by the New World Order crowd and get told they're going to go along with the program or they're going to turn up dead. I don't know if you remember Bill Gates. visited Warren Buffett, and all of a sudden Warren Buffett donated like $5 billion to the Gates Foundation. And now they've had a bit of a falling out, so that's good. So something's changing there, I think. Anyways, there's a David Wilcock actually talks about how what at the time I wrote the book, I thought Howard Hughes had been threatened basically, and he wouldn't go along with it. That's the reason he was hiding out. He was a recluse. Okay, he was hiding out all the time. Well, and so since then I have learned. There's a David Wilcock video that says that after World War II, Howard Hughes got blackballed, and he couldn't get any defense contracts from the military-industrial complex, and so he had gotten some young ladies to go and sleep with the military-industrial complex types to find out why he was blackballed and couldn't get any defense contracts. And that's when he found out that they were planning on doing, they wanted to kill off 90% of the population and have fake pandemics and all sorts of stuff. And so he had a set of manuals and procedures all published, and Kennedy was actually implementing that. And remember, Kennedy circulated $6 billion worth of U.S. Treasury notes, and that was the first thing that happened when Johnson was on the airplane back to Washington, D.C. after they killed Kennedy, is he recalled that $6 billion worth of U.S. Treasury notes, and I've got some of them, quite frankly. Anyways, so what happened is, but you think about it, that when you circulate Treasury notes, then that's telling the bankster thieves, you're done. You're done. We're not going to borrow your money anymore. And they can't have that, can they? So anyway, so that's why Howard Hughes is hiding out, because I think that he figured he was next. And also there's a helicopter crash in 1984 that involving Trump, and so I think that Trump had been approached too. There was a helicopter crash, and what happened is it crashed for a very unusual reason. Trump canceled out at the last minute, and 3 of his executives got killed, and the blades came off the helicopter. I've never heard of blades coming off a helicopter. I started out in 1976 working on helicopters as a mechanic, so I know a little bit about helicopters, and I can tell you that blades don't come off of helicopters. They crash for a lot of reasons, but not for blades coming off. Anyways, for what that's worth. In reality, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. Some people say Trump is controlled opposition. I don't know if he is or not. I just like him because they hate his guts so much. So that just means he's good in my book, I'll tell you. Anyways, so the War of Independence was caused by the Siskiyou Act of 1666. It's caused by the Crown imposing the minor estate on the colonists. Think about it. That's exactly what was happening. This is the Declaration of Independence. And so you understand what the Declaration of Independence is. It's basically a list of grievances. There's a preamble, a list of grievances, and a postamble. And so this is some of the grievances. He's endeavored to prevent the population of these states for the purpose of obstructing laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither. And so, that sounds like open borders and election interference, raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He's obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. That sounds like kangaroo courts. He's erected a multitude of new offices, sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out our substance. Well, that's happening today with the military, police everywhere, code enforcers. There's always somebody else coming around wanting, you got to do this or you got to do that. He's affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil law. That's martial law, and that's exactly what's happening. He's combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. That's color of law, and that's happening today, folks. Protecting them by a mock trial, kangaroo courts. I mean, that's if they want to get somebody off, then they hold a show trial and it all disappears, and otherwise, if they want to, if it's their political agenda to sell you into slavery for the rest of your life for taking a loaf of bread, they'll do that too. And so it's all mock trials, it's all kangaroo courts. That stuff is going on all over the place today. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, bringing color of law outside, not exceeding 10 miles square. That's exactly what they're doing, folks. For abolishing a free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule, and that's bringing the District of Columbia and outside, not exceeding 10 miles square, into these colonies. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. Gee, that's going on too, folks. That's martial law. That's part of the martial law. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, altering fundamentally the forms of our government. Gee, that sounds like a military dictatorship. For suspending our own legislatures, declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. That's more military dictatorship stuff, folks. He's abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Well, that sounds like martial law dictatorship under the Trading with the Enemy Act. Okay, we're the enemy. Okay, I mean, has anybody noticed that? I certainly have, and a lot of other people have too. He destroyed the lives of our people. Well, that's what happens when they populate the jails with commercial transactions. Texas has a bigger percentage of people in jail in the worst communist dictatorships, more than China, more than the Soviet Union. Whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain for the purpose of raising a revenue in His Majesty's colonies, provinces, and plantations in North America has been found by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no shit, Batman. Again, that's minor estate and taxes. That from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, or assessment whatever payable on any of the colonies of his provinces or plantations in North America or the West Indies, except only such duties as may be expedient for the imposition of the regulation of commerce. Well, that's where it should have been in the first place. And that's closing the barn door after the horses get out. That's George III, chapter 12, 1778. And 2 years after the war, after the Declaration of Independence. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. Sestacaius, minor estate, Roman cult. It's all coming from the Roman cult. For when they were driven out of all their former holes, they devised a new method of conveyance by which lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fees to the use of the religious houses. Usufruct, folks, Roman cult. Thus distinguishing between the possession and the use and receiving the actual profits, while a season of the land remained in the nominal fee, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. The Roman cult runs the courts. They're all Roman cult Baal priests. To be bound in conscience to account to the sestacaius for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. So isn't that convenient, eh? The Roman cult gets to decide whether it's lawful or not, eh? How convenient. Minor estate is created by hospitaliers. When you turn up dead, they get to pillage the Treasury Direct account, use it to pay off the national debt. They use the minor estate Treasury Direct account to pay for your imprisonment. They sell you into slavery. He, the prisoner, has as a consequence of his crime not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights, except those which the law and its humanity affords him. He is for the time being a slave of the state. They're selling you into slavery. So think about it, folks. That's when you have a baby in the hospital, and that's slavery is what it is. They're selling you into slavery. The United States shall guarantee in every state in this union a Republican form of government, a well-regulated militia being necessary. This is the only place that the word necessary is used in the Constitution. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I'm afraid it's probably going to come down to that, quite frankly. It's pretty sad, but I'm afraid that that's what's going to happen. That's the Second Amendment. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to follow me on Steam at Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video on YouTube. Don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. On Steam, don't forget to vote and make your comments. So the subscribe button's already clicked. The bell is not because it's not vibrating. And so, the arrow's pointing at the bell. Give me liberty or give me death. That's Patrick Henry after witnessing a man flogged to death for refusing to take a license. A license is a contract, a right given by some competent authority to do an act without which such authority would be illegal. The instrument or writing which secures this right is also called a license. A license is express or implied. In other words, when you pay a filing fee, that's a license fee. They're converting a right into a privilege. The corrupt Star Chamber courts of England required defendants to have counsel. Star Chamber stood for swiftness and arbitrary power. It was a limitation on the common law. Okay, so Star Chamber, this is all the minor estate, the Roman cult, Satanism. Although the right to self-representation is not a license to abuse the dignity of the courtroom, neither is it a license for the court to impose upon the defendant its own choice of counsel. The defendant's Sixth Amendment right to choose counsel or to proceed pro se is an essential part of his right to a fair trial. It's to choose your own counsel. That's right. So there's a good case to use to argue that. There's two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword, the other is by debt. And that's John Adams, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're creating a fictitious debt so they can enslave you. That's what the agenda is. They want slavery. When acting to enforce a statute and the subsequent amendments to the present age, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer. That's what happens with the minor estate. Okay, the minor estate gets administrative officers. Remember, administrative is executive. Okay, it's a dictatorship. Not in a judicial capacity, courts administering or enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially, but merely acts as an extension as an agent for the involved agency, but only in a ministerial and not a discretionary capacity. It's the accepted rule, not only of state courts, but of the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency. So they want to assault you with that minor estate so they can put it administrative. And then the judge gets to collect a royalty on the case. I mean, that's what it's all about. Most judges retire millionaires because of the royalties they collect on these Admiralty Maritime law cases because they converted you over to the minor estate. That's exactly what's going on, folks. And so have your babies at home, and you can stop that, at least for your babies. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, and otherwise act as mere clerks of the involved agencies. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. Where there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been the law from the days of Marshal Saya. Judge wears a military uniform. The judge sits there and plays stupid. If you fail to follow some obscure rule or procedure, they sell you into slavery. Everything they do is a fraud and a nullity. Judge has no oath of office to a corporation or a minor estate. So he just presumes and you volunteered. Oh, there's a bunch of bought and paid for whores right there. Judge works for the state. Prosecutor works for the state. Police or witness works for the state. Vast majority of the disputes that the police initiate on behalf of their employer are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the police, the only witness, also the police, all represent the same party. This is for the minor estate. This is what the minor estate gets. And since no corpus delicti, mens rea, or acts reus can be produced, doesn't technically qualify to be adhering to its own laws. The state, therefore, is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. And that's exactly right. But in fact and in law, such statutes are intended to be applied to those who are here as residents in this state under the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Federal Constitution and the so-called 14th Amendment. Copies of these documents can be found on my website and linked under my recent YouTube videos. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information, shares a DVD with over 100 searchable law dictionaries and other books and forms, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the fake money, the military script, the forced loans, the Federal Reserve notes, the securities, cashapp, gifts, checks, money orders. Send me an email for particulars. This is the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. He, the prisoner, has as a consequence of a crime not only forfeit his liberty, but all his personal rights, except those which the law and its humanity affords him. He is, for the time being, a slave of the state. So that's what they're doing, and that's what your babies are being set up for if you have them in a hospital, folks. I hate to say it, but that's the truth, and it gets worse than that. If a man be found stealing of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you. If we were a truly Christian nation, this stuff wouldn't be going on. But there's, we're not Christian. Okay, I hate to say it, but, and so you read in Deuteronomy chapter 28, there's a bunch of curses that come across a nation that's not following God's law. That stuff is happening. That's happening right now, folks. I hate to say it, but that's happening. And it's the judgments of God against us for failing to follow God's law. It's time to get unplugged. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. It's time to get unplugged, folks. America needs God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. The New World Order will require you that you worship government. And that's going on in China right now with the Falun Gong, and they're doing their organ harvesting programs. Okay, so they're collecting all the money out of the minor estates. Okay, and then they get to sell their organs. And so they're using that to pay off the national debt. Tyranny is the exercise of power beyond right, which nobody can have a right to. And this is making use of the power anyone has in his hands, not for the good of those who are under it, but for his own private separate advantage. When the governor, however entitled, makes not the law but his will the rule, and his commands and actions are not directed to the preservation of the properties of his people, but to the satisfaction of his own ambition, revenge, covetousness, or any other irregular passion. 'Tis a mistake to think this fault only in monarchies. Other forms of government are liable to it as well as that. For wherever the power that is put in any hands for the government of the people and the preservation of their properties is applied to other ends and made use of to impoverish, harass, subdue them to arbitrary and irregular commands of those who have it, there it presently becomes tyranny, whether those that use it are one or many. And that's John Locke, Two Treatises of Government, Book 2, Chapter 18, Section 199 and Section 201. We hold these truths to be self-evident. This is Declaration of Independence, the preamble. That all men are created equal, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces the design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. And that's what's happening today, folks. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate a honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. And that's exactly what's happening today. If it wasn't for if they could not create money from nothing, there would be no minor estate. They're creating it from nothing. 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, the Internal Revenue Service, the U.S. Department of Commerce, and the U.S. Department of Labor were all created in 1913. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people will ever allow the private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Why do you think there's all these homeless people nowadays, folks? Hello, it's time to wake up. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Very soon, every American will be required to register biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel. We will hold a security interest over them forever by operation of law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges. This is actually part of and this is going to continue as Colonel Edward Mandell House in a private meeting with Woodrow Wilson, who was the president at the time. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser, for not 1 in a million could ever figure our plans, and if by accident 1 or 2 would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. And after all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud that we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner every American will unknowingly be our servant. However begrudgingly, the people would become helpless without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. And that's what Biden is doing right now, and that's exactly what's happening now, folks. And you moms, you can put a stop to it for your babies by having your babies at home and using a midwife, and there's lots of very capable midwives out there, but search it out. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Don't ever take my word for anything. There's one of the things is going to be endless wars, okay? They get you to go. They are to get you into their killing fields so their banksters can collect the fake money in the Treasury Direct account. But you can fight for your bankrupt corporation. That's why they want these endless wars. According to Britannica.com, this was the invasion of Normandy in World War II. There was 135,000 U.S. casualties, 65,000 United Kingdom casualties, 18,000 Canadian casualties, 12,200 French casualties, 550,000 total casualties, both sides. And so this is an image. I downloaded this from Britannica.com, and so there was a total of 550,000 people died. So all of those Treasury Direct accounts got liquidated. So you figure if there was like $1 million in each account, then 550,000, that means like about $5 trillion went to pay off national debts. Okay, so the banksters made all their money. They got their money. And a bunch of people went and spilled their guts all over the place, and the banksters made out like bandits. Okay, this is all about the bankster thieves. Okay, they are thieves. It's satanic. It's a satanic blood sacrifice. They're Satanists. They want to get their fake money. Okay, they're Satanists. This is diabolically evil. Taxes were not raised to carry on wars. Wars were raised to carry on taxes. They want you dead. The war is not meant to be won. It's meant to be continuous. So hospitals are creating the security to be deposited into a Treasury Direct account. Hospitals are acting in fraud. It's corporate greed. Hospitals are selling your babies into slavery. All prisoners were sold into slavery because of the minor estate. The corruption in the courts is because of the minor estate. And so you can't put a stop to it all, but you can certainly put a stop to it for your sons and daughters. The midwife prepares. This is what happened in our when our babies were born at home. The midwife prepared the birth paperwork and gave it to us, and we could do with it what we wished. And what I would do is buy the biggest family Bible available, and there's a big, huge family Bible. You go into a Christian bookstore, and there's a big section in the front or the back. Sometimes in the front, sometimes in the back. And it's a place where births and deaths and things, family events are recorded. And so you start recording those events. And then what you do is you get a notary to make a certified copy of the page, and and then you make a short affidavit announcing the birth of your son or daughter, and attach the certified copy as evidence and record it into the county records. And that's what I did. And this is what I did in Arizona when my son was born. And of course, he was born in a hospital, and so it still had the forced birth certificate and all of that. Anyways, it's just a short affidavit, and it talks about when my son was born, and where, and so, and then this is it's just a 2-page affidavit is all I did, and anybody can do that. This was I went and redacted this because it's got the personal information. So this was the birth certificate worksheet. My wife refused to sign it. She didn't know, and so they just put down refused, which means it's signed. And so she didn't know. We were still in the learning curve at that time. And this was back in 2005, 2004, something like that. Let's see. 2005. So anyways, and then there's one of the documents from the hospital, one of the post-delivery discharge instructions that we got from the hospital. And so they went and created a bond, and so that my son is a slave. They've enslaved him. And so I am working on something with Janet Yellen, and I've got some criminal complaints here I'm getting ready to file, and everybody and their brother is going to get a copy of that. And then what I'll do is I'll probably send her a nasty gram, and that'll be really nasty, but that'll be in my HowTube channel. And so some of this stuff will be on the regular YouTube channel, some will be on HowTube because I don't want YouTube taking it down. But anyways, that's about it. This is what we did, and it's not that difficult. And notice and declaration of birth, and so then we collected our evidence and attached it and with a little affidavit and recorded it into the county. And so what I did is I went and got my son on U.S. Airways benefits by doing this. I gave him this, and I didn't give him the birth certificate. I told him that there is none, but I give him this document, and so I got my son on the company benefits, and so they accepted it. And so it's all a journey. We're sharing ideas, and so I'm sure other people are going to come up with ideas too. And so the important thing is that we network, and there's ways of doing stuff. If you read in the passport application, it talks about that you can use family Bible records. Okay, they recognize that the family Bible is a valid place to keep records. And so you can use that to apply for a passport. And you just have to make an affidavit, get a notarized copy where the notary is going to certify this is a true copy. And so then they have to presume it's true. And the thing about this is that once it's recorded in the county, then it becomes public policy after 30 days, and they have to accept it. And so it's all a networking thing. Anyways, that's it for this one. So moms, I want you to think about whether you want to have a baby in the hospital. Your baby's going to be a slave if you do, but I'm not saying don't panic. Don't there's a lot of ways of dealing with things, and so if you're not comfortable, if you're not completely comfortable, talk to midwives and get to know them and find out if that's something that you can do. And if you can, then I would recommend that you do it, but don't do something you're not comfortable with. And so and there's something that you and your husband, if you have a husband, should talk about together and decide together. Anyways, thanks for watching and have a great day.